creating more and more data demand on the networks, giving us opportunities to build new radio technologies, new graphics, new microprocessor, new connectivity, all these different technologies, and we showed off a few kind of interesting new things that people are doing. We're getting a lot of traction for some of these technologies as well. So maybe with that, just as a short intro, I'm happy just to open it up to questions rather than give you another speech. So please feel free, and I guess you guys have microphones, so who would like to ask a question?
Ask a question. Could you discuss if there is any sort of progress or what precisely you folks are doing to solve the 28 nanometer supply issues? Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about also, as part of that, is what the opportunity, is there a lost opportunity there in terms of the lead you had on or have on that processor?
Yeah. So what we're doing so the 28 nanometer is the process technology that we're building the newest generation of chips in. And we announced earlier that we had shortage relative to demand, and the reason for that was we were on the leading edge of a new process technology for our fab, for our integrated circuit fab. And it just didn't, the capacity just didn't get built enough. There were early questions about whether it was yield issues. It wasn't yield issues. It was literally just not enough machines in the factory fast enough. And demand really came on very quickly. Supply came on slower than we had anticipated. And kind of these things all played together and left us really with a couple of quarters of shortage of supply. We responded by working closely with our main supplier, TSMC, to pull in more capacity there. We also, as we announced in our last earnings call, spent some money on bringing up new capacity faster. So we have multiple sources that are going to be supplying us chips at the end of the year, towards the end of the year. So that's really what's going on there. In terms of we certainly left an opportunity for competition to come and take some slots just because we couldn't fill them. I think that if I look forward, while it's the case that customers are not happy when you tell them you can't supply them, they also recognize that the next chips that we have coming next year are great chips too, and they are all sort of lining up to get to build their devices around those. So I think there may be some impact to it, but I don't think it's going to be a very significant impact.
Can I ask one quick follow-up on
Sure.
that? Along those lines, I don't expect a yes or no answer, but kind of, you guys are not just a modem maker anymore, you do a lot more. I mean, is it time to invest some of that cash in a fab? And talk about your thinking there as you're going forward.
So we've considered, I'll just repeat the question for those who didn't hear. So the question was, does it make sense for us to get into running our own fab? And we have enough money to do it. And I would say right now, our inclination is to retain the model we have. We like the model we have. And the reason is because when you have a fab, you have to spend a lot of your management cycles on keeping that fab full. We spend none of our cycles on that. We spend all of our management thought on what's the next new technology, and so we're not a manufacturing company in that sense. We have the skill sets. Obviously, we have people inside the company who have built fabs. We have people who build work on the process technology, and we have the core competencies inside to do it. But I think if we can continue to leverage sort of the more horizontal fabless model, I think we're in a better position that way, because also things can happen fast. You can leverage other companies' demands, maybe for trailing edge technologies that'll help amortize the cost of the fab and so forth. So there's a lot of benefits to the fabless model. So we prefer to keep that model. There is the possibility, and certainly we are looking at different business arrangements to make sure that the supply shortage that we have this time doesn't occur again. Today, it's not that we're writing big checks to do that, but if that's what it took in the future, I wouldn't say no to that. I mean, we will weigh those issues. Whether that meant that we own the whole fab ourselves, I think that's far less likely. But maybe possible. I mean, I don't want to say no to anything. It's really, it's in a little bit of a state of flux because we are still managing through the shortage issue that we have right now. It's going to be the easiest press conference.
What is the next technology?
The next technology on the integrated process side, it's a modification to the one that we're using right now to for higher performance of the microprocessors while still driving the low power consumption. So that it's not a change in the size, the feature size of the chips. I'm not sure whether that's the technology you were asking me about, but it's sort of a difference in the process, which is a fairly small process change. What that means is we're not going to have the same issues of ramping up capacity. So, so we feel good about where we're sitting there. And then the semiconductor fabs, all these factories, they are running very quickly to get down to smaller and smaller geometries. And the reason is because there's a competition that's being driven by Intel saying that they're going to drive their process technology very fast. So sort of everybody has to respond to that. Everybody has to move fast, and that's what's happening right now on the process side. There's lots of other new technologies on the radio side, on the microprocessor side. We're making huge investments in all of these areas, and really, as I said earlier, a lot of it is in response to consumer demand for more data rates, more throughput to their devices, or better graphics, better user interface designs, some of these more exotic technologies that we demonstrated today. So a lot of possibilities for advancements in technology.
Currently, the ARM architecture is finding its way in the server business due to high energy costs and so on. And Dell announced a solution based on Marvel Armada chips. When will we see Snapdragon chips for server? I mean, assuming you are working on ARM v8 64-bit architecture currently next year.
So we are working on 64-bit architectures, and we have not announced anything on the server side, but it's definitely an opportunity that we see out there. And like you said, I mean, a data center is spec'd based on the power it consumes generally. So if you can reduce the power, the heat, I mean, a lot of things get better quickly. And so there are definitely some of our competitors that have already started in that area to make announcements about products. We haven't made any announcements yet, but it's certainly an area that we're looking at. And I think that the case is that these very power efficient architectures that came from the mobile space, it's like like the classic model of disruptive innovation. It's coming up, and the traditional model gets pushed into smaller and smaller niche. And I think server is a clear opportunity, and it's a green thing to do anyways. I mean, it's sort of something that we need to do to lower the power consumption of these server farms. So.
So this is a little bit more on the operator side of the mobile market, but we don't have roaming between LTE networks right now. If I'm an AT&T LTE customer, my phone right now won't roam onto Verizon's LTE network. Is Qualcomm doing anything on the chip side to address that?
The key issue that LTE presents is the fact that there are so many different bands people are using for LTE. And the reason is because governments around the world literally just went around and tried to find whatever bands they could free up for this, because there's so much demand for data by the consumer. So what we're doing is we're actually building more agile front end, so that the issue is not the Snapdragon chip itself, it's actually the radio chips and all the components that sit between the Snapdragon and the antenna. And we are spending a lot of effort trying to improve agility of them. We're trying to improve the number of bands that you can support. And all of these things are going to come together to allow a phone that operates on one company's LTE network to, interoperate with another company's LTE network. And then I think, probably some of it will also come down to just the business issues that they all need to agree on how they're each going to pay if you're running data on somebody else's network. But generally, they've worked those things out. So I think probably the biggest issue right now is just making sure that we can support a lot of different bands in one phone. I mean, today we can support a lot of different bands, but only a certain number per phone. And we just need to increase that number.
Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. Very excellent keynote in the morning. I wanted to hear from you, what will be the broad strategy of Qualcomm in Africa, considering that in just one country, in that continent, Nigeria, I understand if the figures are right, they sold about 30 million devices last year. I'd like to know, how do you intend to expand the market in that continent?
So Africa is definitely an interesting opportunity for us, and there have been, we've worked with some of our partners who have rolled out networks in Africa. In the days of where we were pushing CDMA 2000 mostly, we really went around trying to get those networks built up, have them roll out mobile broadband, and in fact, in Nigeria, as you mentioned, the vast majority, like almost all of the internet traffic goes over mobile networks. And so making sure that we can drive the latest technologies into Africa so that people have access to mobile broadband, and on the network side, and then on the device side, we're spending a lot of effort, and it's actually not just Africa related, but it's sort of any emerging market related, to drive the cost of the devices down so that we can get lower cost smartphones out to the masses. And people are working on $100, $150, then $100, then sub $100 smartphones. So there's really a lot of effort there, and it takes a tremendous amount of research and development investment to address the low end, because you want to provide the capabilities, the functionality, but the cost has to be so much lower. And also what we found is that a lot of times the companies that are able to sell in some of the emerging markets are ones that they might be smaller companies that have a certain distribution channel or some way that they have some advantage, a certain brand or something. And this happened pretty significantly in China, where a lot of these small companies took a fairly large share of the market. And then those companies are selling for export as well. And I think a lot end up in Africa. So we're spending a lot of effort trying to drive the cost down, drive the R&D spend in order to get a new product out to market. And we're very focused on lowering the cost of smartphones.
At the beginning of the year, one of Qualcomm's top managers, who doesn't work in the company anymore, said to me that the company had plans to open a research and development center in Russia. So would like to hear something about these plans in particular.
Okay. I wouldn't say that we have a specific plan for a center today, but we are definitely looking at opportunities to see how we can make use of, there's a lot of talent in Russia, obviously, software, mathematics, great opportunities there. And so we're continuing to look. I wouldn't say that we have a specific plan right now, but yeah, it's definitely possible for the future. And we've put a lot of effort into technologies for the market. So, for example, supporting GLONASS. So the Russian market is definitely an important one for us. It's a growth opportunity for us, and we will look to see whether we can take advantage of the skill sets that are in the region.
Hi, Paul. Regardless, the chipset vendors are forced to optimize power consumption in mobile device. I have the feeling that the battery life problem has not been solved yet. I have two different smartphones with different chipsets, and their batteries last at most 1 day. Does Qualcomm has any research in that area? What kind of new technologies for batteries do you foresee that could replace the current ion lithium batteries?
So we look at all the different battery technologies because, as you said, it hasn't seemed like that's progressed rapidly enough. Most of the stuff that we've done has been on the demand side, so we've put a lot of effort into reducing the power consumption of the chipsets. We're investing in this mirror solid display technology because it turns out the display uses a lot of the power in the phone. The phones are definitely getting better, but it's not happening fast enough, I think. And so one of the other ways that we've looked at it is how do you actually recharge the phone more frequently? And so we've been working on wireless power technologies also. So the notion is you just put your phone down on the table and it would already start to recharge. And in that way, you kind of recharge it frequently over the day, probably not fully, but just top it up every so often over the day. And I think that seems to me to be probably the most likely near-term fix. And then after that, I think getting the displays to be more power efficient is probably the next opportunity for us.
As you just said, smartphones get cheaper and cheaper, real smartphones, Android devices and so on. So what is the future of Brew and other really cheap phones?
Yeah, I think we definitely focus Brew on feature phones. There's still a fairly large market for feature phones, but we made the decision that that's where we're going to target it. And so to the extent that if smartphones become 100% of the market, then it will be less relevant, but certainly less relevant. But I think there still is a reasonably sized feature phone market out there. So that's where we targeted it. Targeted at the low end of the market, provide capabilities to people who can't afford a smartphone, even though we're trying, as I said, trying to push the smartphone down below $100. The feature phones, below $20. So there is still a gap there, and there's still an opportunity for Brew.
For how long time? What do you think was the time frame?
It depends. So smartphone depends on a lot of things besides just the chipset. It's kind of the cost of the display, how much memory you put in it, how many other sensors you have in it, those kinds of things. And so it seems to me that there's always going to be some subset of the market that'll be below that, but my guess is that over time, a vast percentage of the market will be smartphones. Although it's so interesting, when you look back, you look at the kind of market share of different tiers of devices, the market is definitely skewed higher towards high-end devices. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out over time as you get smartphones or smartphone functionality pushing down, but maybe you don't get all the functionality you want at the low end. How does that play out versus a better feature phone and a worse smartphone? I'm not sure exactly. It's funny. I talk to some people who whip out they have their smartphone and they also carry around a little flip phone from long ago. So I don't know. You can never tell what people are going to end up doing. I think it's pretty clear people are going to use a smartphone. They're going to use a tablet. Do they carry something else with them too? Who knows?
Integration of components into the system on the chip has obviously been a big part of Qualcomm's success. You guys have got the graphics, the processors, the radios. Is there anything left to integrate into